What's up, dudes? Now, it is pretty common to want a well-developed chest. I mean, it's pretty impressive. It gives you that Herculean look, and you can communicate through pectoralis Morse code. You'll notice that there is a lot of information out there on how to develop your chest for men and women. And some of the information is good and some maybe not so good. And that's why we want to make this video, to go over a lot of the things that you want to take in consideration in developing your chest, going over my favorite exercises when it came to developing my chest, and one thing that a lot of these channels don't want to talk about. So let's get started. I always try to get some energy in before any workout. Today we have chest, and it is the morning, so I'm having some breakfast. Very simple. Got some oatmeal, some great carbs from the oatmeal, and also the blueberries, and adding a little bit of protein, some milk. So a pretty good energy source from this meal. But I'm also making a post-workout shake with a banana, and as much as the post-workout anabolic window sounds good, you do have a pretty good amount of time after your workouts to get in your nutrition. But for me, it just feels good to have something after an intense workout. It feels very refreshing. So after I finish breakfast, we're gonna be heading out the door and getting this started. The clothing I'm wearing in this video is by TLF. If you want to check out some of their stuff, go over to tlf.com. And if you do pick up some of their stuff, use the code TLF-buff to get 15% off. All right, we just made it to the gym, and I do want to mention how important food is. You can't ignore that. Food is an integral part in helping to develop any muscle group. It's the supplies you're giving yourself. So it is very synergistic with the exercise, the stimulation, the workouts that you do, the rest, recovery, nutrition. It all works hand in hand. But this video is not about the nutrition, it's about the stimulation, the movements, the activation through certain exercises. And before we get into the exercises themselves, I do want to go over the anatomy of the chest, and we're going to keep this very simple, and thankfully that's all it needs to be. Now, the pectoralis major, that is the chest. There's two heads in the pectoralis major, the sternocostal head and the clavicular head. Now, it's named that because the origin point of the sternocostal head is on the sternum. The clavicular head is on the clavicle, so very easy to remember, and both insert into the humerus. Now, the origin point is the anchor. It never moves. The insertion is always what moves, and the muscle is going from a stretch position, shortening to bring your upper arm in all different directions, because it is a fan-like muscle. There's fibers that go in all different directions, so it can be efficient in doing lots of different things. And that's why you'll notice hundreds of exercises when it comes to chest, because the chest can do so much. Now, if you're looking at just a purely functional thing, back in the hunter-gatherer days, the chest can be used as a climbing muscle in conjunction with the lats. So if you're climbing up from a flex position in the shoulder, it's shortening and pulling it down. So it can help with that. Also throwing from a stretch position here, it shortens and brings the arm kind of across the body, over and across there. So throwing spears, throwing rocks, whatever it is, but we're not using it in that way, as much as we did back then. Now, we want to make it look good. We want to activate it in the gym through bench presses, through flies. So now that you understand the anatomy of the chest and how simple it is, now you're going to have a better idea of why you're doing what you're doing in the gym in certain exercises. And speaking of exercises, I want to go over my top exercises for the chest that's really helped develop my chest over the years. All right, my first exercise is going to be the unilateral cable fly. Now, some of you might be thinking, why are you talking about an exercise like this when you can be talking about something like the bench press? And that is true. Bench press is an amazing exercise, and we're going to be going over that a little bit later. But I do want to talk about this exercise first, and why I usually start my workouts with something like this is because it's all about being able to activate the chest properly. Now, a lot of people have hard times with this, and I have definitely had it in the past as well. To be able to stimulate your chest correctly, you want to make sure you can activate it correctly. Now, with compound movements, that can be a little difficult because there's a lot of things going on in a compound movement and a lot of different muscles working in conjunction with your chest too. So it's really hard to kind of get that relationship with your chest and really stimulate and activate it the best. So a movement like this is good for a couple reasons. It's not only an isolation movement, meaning that it's only the shoulder joint working, what we were talking about earlier in the anatomy. It is bringing the chest into a stretch position because it's moving or abducting your humerus away from your body. So all of a sudden, those fibers are stretched out. Now they have to shorten and contract to bring or horizontally adduct your arm inward. You can even cross over, cross center line of the body there, giving it a little extra squeeze to really build that relationship and activation in that chest muscle, to understand, you know, how to contract it, how to really feel that muscle working. It being a unilateral motion is gonna help a little bit extra, is because now you're able to concentrate on one side, one movement. So you can really feel that muscle working, and I mean literally feel it, because you can use your other hand here to hold the muscle as you're pulling it in to feel that contraction. So you're pre-fatiguing, pre-stimulating, pre-exhausting the muscle through something like this before moving on to a bigger motion like compound movement like the bench press. Now your chest is not only a little bit pre-fatigued and pre-stimulated, now you're really built that relationship and that mind-muscle connection. So once you get into that compound movement, then you can really feel it, and then chest has to work a little bit harder as well. So the next exercise is gonna be the bench press. Now this is utilizing flexion at the shoulder joint and extension at the elbow joint. So it is a compound movement, and you're able to go pretty heavy with it because you're not only working the chest, all of a sudden now you're incorporating a little bit in the triceps and the anterior delt. And that's one of the reasons why I love this exercise so much. It can put a lot of load on that muscle, extra load that maybe it's not necessarily used to, but the problem being a compound movement is a lot of things can go wrong. So some people might have a hard time feeling the activation in the chest and maybe feeling discomfort in the shoulder, or maybe even have injured themselves in the past because of this exercise. So you do have to be very careful, and you have to follow a few steps in this exercise that we'll go over a little bit later. But another reason why I love this exercise so much, it's very adjustable. So I'm not only talking about the flat bench press with the barbell, you can all of a sudden move it into an incline with the barbell, or a decline, or go from a barbell to dumbbells. So you can not only change the angles of the motion, incorporating a little bit more stimulus in different areas and fibers of the pectoralis major, but all of a sudden now, if you incorporate maybe dumbbells instead of a barbell, it not only increases the stabilization, the need for stabilization, because each hand has independent weights, but now you can adjust the angle of your hand or grip to make sure you're feeling it in the chest the best possible way. So barbell, a little bit more of a fixed position. All of a sudden dumbbells, you can kind of move your hands in to really get a good squeeze, and even move the dumbbells inward as well as upward. So a lot of adjustability. But the unfortunate part about this is that a lot of things can go wrong. And most likely it's because of one reason, that reason being the rotator cuff. The rotator cuff is a group of muscles that help dynamically stabilize the shoulder joint, because the shoulder joint is the most mobile joint in the body, and it sacrifices stability for mobility. But there's those group of muscles in the rotator cuff that are there to help stabilize it. So that's why you got to take care of them. Now, the muscles are pretty easy to remember. Just think of the acronym SITS. It's the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, the teres minor, and the subscapularis. Now they all originate in the scapula or on the scapula, and they all insert on the head of the humerus to kind of pull that ball into the socket there and hold it there. But if they're weak, or if they're incorrectly warmed up, they're not really going to be able to activate and stabilize as well as they could. And there's one thing you really want in an exercise like the bench press is shoulder stabilization. It's not only going to make you feel stronger in the motion, it's also going to help put emphasis on the chest muscles there. So make sure you warm up the rotator cuff, make sure you strengthen it, and you can do that very simply. It is through external or lateral rotation. Just keep it light, go really slow in both eccentric and concentric motions to really feel that rotator cuff working. Implement that into your training, and you'll get far more benefits out of the bench press. I also want to talk about the positioning and the angles of your hands and elbows as well, because you'll see a lot of videos out there where the guys will be adamant about doing it their way. Bring your hands in close, tuck your elbows, arch the bar, get half reps, get the squeeze, whatever. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but you have to take in consideration that these exercises are not a one-size-fits-all. Morphology changes. And genetics are vastly different among people. So you have to think that your humerus could be longer or shorter than that guy, or your clavicle could be wider or narrower, or the insertion of your pectoralis major could be a little bit higher up or lower on your humerus. And that's really going to dictate where your hand grip should be or where your elbow placement should be for best activation in your chest. So my recommendation would be not to do it the way I do it or the way anyone else's do it. Not to say you can't try that, but you should play around with your own personal position and angle of your hands and your elbows to see what best works for you. Take it very light, just the bar, to see how you can activate your chest the best. Maybe it's flaring your elbows a little bit wider. Maybe it's tucking them in. Maybe it's getting a wider grip, more narrow grip, whatever it is. Find out what works best for you, and that's the best way to move forward. All right, the last exercise I want to talk about, it is one that really helped bring up a weak part in my chest. That weak part being the upper portion of my chest, or the clavicular head in my pectoralis major there. It is going to be the standing underhand dumbbell flies. The reason why I love these so much is because the positioning and the action of this movement is really going to help focus and target and stimulate those upper fibers there. And the reason being is because when we were going over the anatomy earlier, the clavicular portion or head, it attaches or originates at the clavicle. The fibers come down into the humerus. And as you can see, when you bring or flex your shoulder upward and inward, those fibers are really going to help out with that motion. They're going to have to shorten, contract, and that is going to activate them like crazy. So when I found this exercise and started implementing it into my training, I really saw a difference in my chest, but I also really got a great mind-muscle connection to those specific fibers, and it really helped me feel them, because I had a lot of problems in the beginning. I would just do incline presses and incline flies like crazy to try to bring up my upper chest, and I really never felt the activation like I did on this specific movement. Now, one, you go very light with this exercise. Naturally, like most exercises, you want to feel the motion and you want to get in that tune with what the muscle's actually doing. And you also want to really retract your shoulders and depress them, so that way it puts your chest in a better position to do most of the work. Now, the shoulders can be involved a little bit, but you really do want to feel the chest doing most of the work. Get a really good squeeze, full contraction at the top. It's an amazing exercise that I highly recommend if you're dealing with any kind of, disconnect in your upper chest, or maybe even some deficiencies in your upper chest because your lower chest constantly takes over. So we talked about the anatomy of the chest. We also talked about the exercise really helped develop my chest over the years. Now I want to talk about the one thing not a lot of these other channels want to talk about, and that is that your body does not want a big chest. In fact, it's going to work against you in building a lot of muscle, because it takes a lot of energy to produce and maintain that muscle. It's going to want to put a lot of things before building muscle. It's going to want to make sure your brain has enough energy, or your metabolism is running, or your temperature is regular. Basically everything to make sure you're staying alive. And muscle is definitely not on that list. That is very much of a vanity thing, but the good thing is you can manipulate a lot of things to force your body to grow, to build muscle. But it's gonna take a lot of work, it's gonna take a lot of consistency, and it's gonna take dedication from you. Make sure you're on the proper program. Make sure that program increases the complexity as you get more advanced, your frequency, your volume. Make sure you manipulate your calories and macros and track them to make sure you're always progressing and gaining that muscle. So a lot of these guys will make a video and say, do these 3 or 4 exercises and you're gonna get chest like me. That is a bunch of bullshit. That's definitely not how it works. It's gonna take years to build a big chest, especially because everyone's genetics are a little bit different. Yeah, some guys can build a big chest overnight, it seems like, but some guys it takes a long time. It took me a long time to develop my chest. Genetically, I wasn't really blessed with having a big chest. So years and years down the line, I can finally look back and be like, all that work I put into it finally has paid off, but it's a tough climb uphill. And some people maybe are starting skinny, maybe a little bit more overweight. So the goals kind of differ from a lot of people. And what we were talking about genetics earlier, a lot of insertion points and the width of the clavicle and all that all comes into play as well. So your chest might look a little bit different as it's developed, whatever it is, but it's gonna be very unique to you. You just have to put the time and dedication into it. That's where you're gonna reap the rewards. And it's not because you're only doing a few exercises to get a good pump in the gym every once in a while. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let us know if you want to see more like this in the future. Like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff to let us know. And of course, as always, stay buff.